Sorry about the technical glitches. So, Joelle, take it away.
Sure.
Sure.
So hopefully
So
the
hopefully the
audio is
audio
coming
is
through
coming
and the
through
buffering
and
and
the
everything like
buffering and
that.
everything like that.
I was looking
I
at
was
YouTube.
looking
It
at
looked like it
YouTube. It
was a
looked like it
little
was a little to
see
see
what we can
what we
do.
can do.
So it
So it
looks like I'm
looks like I'm
echoing.
echoing.
Maybe am I still
Maybe am I still
echoing? I think
echoing?
Laura
I
may
think
have
Laura may
muted,
have
so maybe
muted, so
that's
maybe
what it
that's what it
was. But
was.
yeah, just let
But
me know
yeah,
if
just
I'm
let me know if I'm
still continue
still
to echo.
continue to echo.
Um,
Um,
so let's
so let's
see.
see. We wanted
I
to. I
posted.
posted.
Okay, everybody's still
Okay,
saying I'm
everybody's still saying
echoing.
I'm echoing.
So let me
So let me
see.
see.
I mean, my
I mean,
speaker
my
is like
speaker is like
all the way
all
down.
the way down.
Like it's actually.
Like it's actually. I
It's
mean,
literally
it's
on like
literally on
10.
like 10.
So I'm not
So
sure
I'm not
how
sure
much
how much
more I can go.
more
I
I
mean, I
can
can
go. I mean, I
try.
can try.
Yeah, I put
Yeah,
it
I
down
mean, I
to
put it down
2.
to 2.
Is that any
Is that
better?
any better?
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
Just let me know if
Just let me
that's
know if that's
any better.
any better.
Yeah, I'm not
Yeah, I'm not
sure.
sure.
I
I
don't
mean,
know what
I
else I
don't know
could
what else I
do.
could.
Sorry.
Okay, talk again.
Hello.
Okay, I think I fixed it. I removed the Skype thing that was in here. Okay, I think you can go now.
Okay. All right. Well, so just let me know if that's any better. I think Laura adjusted that. Okay. All right, guys. Yeah, it was just a setting in the broadcasting thing. Yeah, so we're good. Okay. So, sorry, I'm like losing my train of thought now. Okay, so simplify governance with these admin center settings. So basically, I wrote an article. I'm writing a series for CMS Wire where we are going through Office 365 governance and kind of looking at it from different perspectives. And one of the areas that I focused on was admin center settings and just kind of the whole administrative side of governance. So I posted an article above. There's been a lot of comments, so you might have to scroll up a little bit to get to that, but that is kind of like the companion article to this presentation. So basically, what I wanted to do, let me see if it will go. So the goal basically being that, I know a lot of people on that listen to Power Hour are pretty technical and have a lot of experience as kind of IT administrators. But kind of the goal is just to discover at least one setting that might help with a governance plan. So kind of realizing that there is a setting out there that may actually make a part of your governance plan a bit simpler. And the reason that I like to talk about this is because often what I have found when I've worked with companies and writing governance plans is that the person responsible for the governance or who's kind of taking the lead on it isn't always an IT administrator. So they don't always have a really good insight into what settings are out there and what things are available. Typically, they might be in internal communications if it's an intranet, or they might be like a business analyst or something like that. So they may not actually have access to the admin center and may not really realize what is available to them. So that's why I kind of like to do this, just to kind of hopefully marry the two and get them, give them the ability to kind of make this process a little bit easier. So what I want to do today is just kind of go through a couple of the admin centers, the ones that I specifically work with, which are a lot of the collaboration stuff like SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, Power Apps, and Flow. We'll talk a little bit about, and then Microsoft Search. So earlier, Microsoft Search was down, so hopefully I can at least give you a little bit of information about that, but hopefully it'll be back up by the time I get to that. So let me go ahead and jump in. So Administrative governance before Office 365, we used to split up governance plans into 3 different sections, and the administrative section would often focus on things like the server architecture. It would look at things like guidelines for patching, service packs, backups, things like that. You would even have, like you can see the diagram over there, you would have just basically like a diagram of what your server architecture was, and that was really what kind of summed up the administrative side. Um, Typically in a governance plan for SharePoint on premises. And that has changed quite a bit. So obviously, a lot of those things are no longer things that people need to really worry about in the Office 365 world. So really, what does administration mean? When we talk about Office 365 and governance. And we're going to kind of look at that through these different settings. Now, obviously, there's still a lot of stuff to consider on the administrative side of things like AD, Azure, and things like that. That's not really my wheelhouse, so I don't really dive into that. But of course, just definitely, just keep that in mind that there's a couple of other considerations with those things if you're doing governance for those as well. All right, so let's kind of talk about admin centers. So for those that don't know, we have about 12 admin centers, individual admin centers, and counting inside of there. There are many shared settings. So one thing that I think I'm noticing that they're getting slightly better at is trying to kind of push things into the right place, push settings into the right place, because I think sometimes you would have settings that sit at that top level admin center, and then you would also see that exact same setting, in a different admin center lower. So really just kind of getting that stuff figured out and kind of understanding the settings that you need and where they live. And then I would just basically recommend, if you are an admin who has access to this type of stuff, to basically take some time to really, obviously I'm going to go through some high level stuff today, but definitely take some time to go through these on a regular basis too, because remember, this stuff is constantly changing. Literally since last night, I've noticed something has changed. Since I wrote that article 2 months ago, a lot of things had changed. That's why I had to actually go through it all again, just to kind of make sure I wasn't missing anything. So just take some time to kind of look at these admin centers from time to time and have an understanding of what's out there, and how it may relate to your governance and what you need to manage. So the top level admin center that we probably are all familiar with, because it's the one we hit first. This is where you're going to see some of the core admin functions of just Office 365 in general. So you're going to see things like user licensing, obviously, is out there, password resets and things like that. Health checks, so you can kind of see how the Office 365 your tenant is doing, and like all the different services and how everything is functioning. This is also one area where you would go to log support requests if you have that you need to kind of get in contact with Microsoft because something's going wrong. And then in addition to that, which I'm going to show in a minute, we have some settings that I like to point out. So we have, under settings, we have services and add-ins. So this is really going to be the place to come to if you have an app in Office 365 that you want to check settings on, but it doesn't have its own admin center. So an example would be a planner or forms, and I'll kind of point those out in a minute. And then also organization profile, I want to show some things. There's some really good things for that often come up during governance planning that you can find under the organization profile. And then finally, usage reporting is at that top level. So that usage reporting is very, very key for a governance team. They can see things like user activity and site usage and stuff like that, and really just kind of get an idea of what's going on in their tenant, and what they may need to take a closer look at. So we'll let me go ahead and pull this one over, and let me just make sure I'm in the right tenant. Yep. So here, this is the current admin center. There is a, you can see that we do have a new admin center coming soon because there's a try the preview here. One thing I do know about the new one, the new top level admin center, is that you will be able to kind of manage what blocks that you see here. So you can kind of rearrange and see the things that are most important to you. So depending on, what you're coming, maybe you want the usage report higher or something like that, you'll be able to kind of manipulate that stuff and have it out there. So what I mentioned was under settings, we have services and add-ins. And you'll notice here, and it even has some stuff that's kind of outdated, but you'll notice here that you have kind of an area for high-level admin settings for things that don't have their own admin center. So something like Microsoft Forms, I can click here. And then I have some ability to manage some of the portions of Microsoft Forms if I need to. Things like sharing, being able to share something as a template and things like that. And then we also have Planner. I think there wasn't much in Planner, if I believe. May have actually not have it. Oh yeah, just the iCalendar. Being able to create an iCalendar for the calendar view in Planner. And a couple other things there. We also have under settings, the organization profile. So two things that I like to point out, especially from an Office 365 kind of adoption point of view, is this add custom tile for your organization and then provide customized help desk info. So the add custom tiles for your organization is actually really interesting because as you're getting users more used to the app launcher over here and coming here to get to the different things that they need throughout the day, you can actually add custom tiles there with its own image for things that are not in Office 365. So whether they're custom kind of like line of business applications or web applications that your users use that are not actually a part of Office 365, you can actually link them there and just make that whole thing a little bit easier. So when they go to that portal.office.com or office.com, to start their day, they can actually see tiles for things that aren't actually in Office 365. So that's just a helpful thing I like to point out because that does come up. A lot of people will bury those links to those applications somewhere on their intranet and it's a little bit hard to find or may not be as streamlined, but that just kind of makes it easier being able to do that. And then the other thing that I definitely think is really helpful is this customized help desk contact info. So here under the help right here, you can actually, which is where the question mark is, you can actually put in your own help desk information. So you'll find right by default under there, you will see that it has like the regular Microsoft support stuff, but you can actually put in your own help desk information so that they can easily find who to contact if they have issues with Office 365, in addition to just the kind of default links that Microsoft puts out there. So that's definitely something that I like to point out kind of in this whole governance adoption process. Those two things are pretty helpful. And then obviously under thing here, you also have things like custom themes for your organization, and that can be really helpful with branding and that kind of thing. All right. And like I said, obviously there's support, there's billing, there's users. This is definitely your high level administrator that's going to be able to manage this kind of stuff. So I don't really need to go into too much detail about those. But then reports, we have usage here. So the usage is really interesting, especially if you are trying to track adoption and you are working with a governance team to kind of see how things are going over time. You can actually pick specific reports for different tools and get some good information. I think Laura actually, it was a couple of weeks ago, I think we did a little bit about the usage reports and some security and compliance stuff. But yeah, so you guys have probably seen that, but just like to point it out on that top level. All right, so those are just some of the ones that come to mind for the top level admin center. So let's go ahead and jump in and see what else. Okay, so the Teams and Skype admin center. This admin center is a newer one. It is where they have started to merge in where we used to kind of manage Skype for Business and all its settings have kind of merged into this one admin center with Teams. So you'll see that, a lot of those settings, you'll even see like a link to the legacy portal for Skype, and some of the other stuff that you would probably be used to seeing for Skype in the past, is now part of Teams. Some of the things I like to point out here would be meetings. So under meetings, there's policies and settings that I'm going to kind of show in a few seconds. And then organization-wide settings, there's some specific things around teams, and external and guest use and stuff like that. And you'll see that I honestly will pretty much mention that in almost every one of these admin centers, there's this external user, guest user kind of thing where you're going to see settings around that. So that's really where you can manage it app by app and really determine, what areas you are allowing external users and what areas you are not. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So I'll bring that over here. All right, so here we have a dashboard that just has some helpful information. You'll even notice help articles and some admin training as well, right here on the dashboard for Teams. You have the ability to manage your teams from here, users as well. And then under meetings, we have one thing I like to start with settings, actually. So under meeting settings, allowing anonymous users can join your meetings, your team meetings, email invitation. You can kind of manage logos and stuff like that, help URL, footer, and then there's some specific settings around network. But then in addition to that, and this is something that we even had a client recently kind of asking about something similar, is under meeting policies. Under the global, the org-wide default here, so this is the one that's the default, I have quite a lot of settings around meetings. So you'll see here allowing the Outlook add-in, allow channel meeting scheduling, allow scheduling of private meetings, some of the things around audio and video, like cloud recording and transcription, content sharing, allowing a participant to give or request control. All of those things I can actually manage. And one additional setting down here, the automatically admit users. So we had a customer that was having some issues with getting their external users were having a hard time getting into the Teams meeting. So this is one place where you can actually switch it to everyone or everyone in your organization. So basically allowing them to not have that waiting room that we might be used to seeing in Skype, if that becomes an issue for your organization. But that's just something I like to point out. This kind of takes away that waiting room step so that you don't have to admit them or manage that if they got kicked out during the meeting or something, especially good for larger meetings. So there's some of those settings. So let's skip down to org-wide settings, which really kind of focuses a lot on the Teams area. So external access, users can communicate with external Skype users, external access here. You can even specify specific domains if that is necessary. And then guest access. So that is another area you can manage that for Teams. And then under Teams settings, we have something that I think is really neat. You basically have the ability to turn on or off file sharing and cloud file storage options for the Files tab. And this is really good if you are just getting started with Teams. Maybe the whole, like, you're not moving right into SharePoint or OneDrive, but you're just trying to figure out what you're doing with all your files. You want to get started with Teams. You can actually allow them to connect to, if they're using things like Dropbox, Box, Google Drive, you can actually allow them to connect to those services and have those in the Files tab, while, as a IT organization, you might be kind of figuring out the best plan for migration. You can at least get them in Teams, using Teams, kind of getting a feel for it before the big migration of all their content. So that's just kind of an interesting thing. And you could turn that on and off. So then when if you do then move to OneDrive and you want to stop them from using those, you could come in here and turn that off if you needed to. And then also we have show organization tab and chat. So if you want them to be able to see the organization hierarchy from their profiles in Office 365, who their manager is and all that kind of stuff, you can turn that on and off. devices, and then search as well. So those are just some of the key things. I think the key takeaway would be probably the meeting policies, like I mentioned, just kind of looking over that meeting policy and making sure if you are moving to using only Teams meetings and not using Skype for Business anymore, just kind of having an idea of what the settings are and what's out there. And then org-wide settings, of course, again, just with the external access and team settings, some things to think about there. Okay. And I will stop and see if there's any questions. Sorry, I wasn't keeping up really well. Let me look real quick.
Yeah, there are a couple of questions.
So I think Lisa asked, and somebody may have asked her, yeah, Lisa, you may just have certain admin center access. So all of the admin centers that I'm showing, except for when I get to Power Apps and Flow, that's a little different, and I'll explain that. But if you aren't seeing them, it's probably an access thing. You probably need permission.
Yeah, and Franklin, the Power Apps and Flow they do have admin centers, and they do have roles. It's just in a different place. And so, Joelle, you said you're going to go over that.
Yeah, and I'll probably like even get your input on that too, because I was messing around with that new Power Platform admin center, so we could talk a little bit about that.
All right.
And then Zach is asking under bridge conferencing, so I haven't actually messed with that, but let me pull that back up. Bridge conferencing. What is that, under conference bridges, maybe? Yeah, bridge conferencing. Yeah, so it looks like it's conference bridges let people dial into meetings using a phone, or you can change the phone numbers and settings such as the PIN, etc. So it's basically just an area where you can manage that. All right. So let me go ahead and I'll just keep going. All right, so SharePoint, it's probably the one that most of us use frequently. This has been recently updated, and you will see that in the admin center itself. The updates that they've made to it recently are making it a lot easier to manage all the different sites, so group sites and communication sites, team sites, all of that kind of stuff. And also, it also makes management of hub sites a lot simpler. So before we were having to really rely on PowerShell to create a hub and connect things to a hub, etc. And now we are able to do a lot of that just directly within the admin center. So that's very helpful. And I know a lot of people. I had some customers that wanted to use hub sites but didn't know PowerShell and didn't want to deal with PowerShell. So they were kind of holding off until this became a thing. So that's really good. We also have sharing settings. So obviously, like I mentioned with Teams and SharePoint as well, we can determine either at the top level how external users are able to access things, and then we can actually specify directly on each site how external users are able to use that. So there might be at the top level, you're kind of more secure, but then on a site collection, you might have an extranet kind of situation. So you would be able to, allow external users access to that, where you may not do that with your intranet. So just something to think about. And then settings. So we have some settings. I will mention that in the updated admin center, the settings are a little bit more trimmed down, and I'll show you what those are. But you can still get to the classic admin center to get to some of these additional things. So for example, in the new admin center, you can manage whether or not people can create sites. So that create site button that you get in the SharePoint home, you can turn that on and off. But also, if you wanted to stop users from being able to create subsites in a site, so let's say if you really are following Microsoft's Word and you're going with a flat structure, you want to stop them from creating subsites, in the classic admin center, you can actually switch that on and off. So that's really helpful to know. You can also allow people to connect sites to groups. So if they want to connect an old site, an old classic site to a group, you can allow that. That's another setting in the classic admin center. And then, of course, there's just some stuff around listen libraries and things like that using the modern listen libraries. So let me go ahead and pull that admin center up. All right, so this is the new and improved admin center, and you'll see some, basically some activity here, service, health, message center, just kind of the same stuff we're used to seeing kind of at the top level. And we can go into active sites here, and we can manage things with hub sites, and manage things with sharing, like I mentioned, with external users and stuff like that. We can do that all at the site level. And then in addition to that, if I go to settings, I can listen libraries, I can deal with the new experience, turning that on and off. And I think we just heard recently, and Laura, please correct me if I'm wrong, we just heard recently that you will not be able to, I think sometime in April, will no longer be able to keep things locked at the classic look, right? Like keeping
That is correct. And that's that global setting.
Yeah. Keep your entire environment locked to be classic listen libraries. That was something that we just recently heard. So just something to keep in mind if you are if you haven't started the modern process. We also have site creation. So as I mentioned here, you can determine where sites are created, and then also this option right here is pretty huge. And this also comes up a lot with governance, is letting users create new sites. So letting them create communication sites, letting them create team sites, all of that kind of stuff. It's kind of just allowing that. And as I mentioned, if we go back to the classic admin center for SharePoint, which I just clicked on the left-hand side, and go to settings, then I also have the ability to limit subsite creation as well. So that's right here. So I can actually say hide the subsite command and hide the subsite. Show the subsite command only for classic sites. Show the subsite command for all sites. So I can actually make that determination there. And then connections from sites to Office 365 groups. If you want to allow site collection administrators to connect their sites to a group or not, that's pretty important depending on how you decide to use the Office 365 groups. And then I think there's just a site pages, basically allowing users to create site pages or not allowing them. That's definitely something that I feel that, that's probably why this setting isn't being carried over, is because eventually they're not going to have a choice. And that's just a couple of things there. All right. Let me see if there's any questions. So I did, Dabina, I think you're asking about hub sites. So we did one a while back, which just kind of goes over it at a high level, but we can definitely plan to do another one that kind of goes into hub sites in a little bit more detail. So I'll definitely add that to our ideas.
And we did add all that that is in our power user training that we teach. Yes. And we did a whole good bit of that in there. At iwmentor.com, we do, just a side note, we do have little free modules in some of those power user little courses, just FYI. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So OneDrive. So next, OneDrive, we have a couple of areas that are important to know. So sharing, once again, this is just kind of digging into external users and how the links that people are sending out, how long they'll last and how they'll function. So I'll show that in a minute. Syncing, managing the ability to sync to a user's PC, and then also just kind of there are options around restricting sync, to PCs that are joined to your domain. So there's an ability to do that. If you're for some reason worried about a user syncing to their personal computer or something like that, you can actually manage that in the OneDrive Admin Center. Storage limit. So you can set the default storage and deleted item retention. So how long, when they delete something, how long it stays in the recycle bin that's connected to OneDrive. And then device access as well. So let's take a look at that.
And there's also group policies there are group
Yes.
policies you can roll out around OneDrive.
Yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I actually haven't dug into that.
Well, of course, I don't have a domain, so I haven't done it myself, but there are group policies that you can deploy in your domain that will do things like, set the OneDrive as the default document location for all the computers, and just various different restrictions on how just some of the settings as far as the OneDrive client settings on all your computers.
Cool. So yeah, we have for sharing, we have the links, basically anyone with the link, only people in your organization, basically allowing the default link type and allowing them to decide that. And then you can even do things around like how long the link lasts and what it allows them to be able to do. So whether with files or folders. So you can see view, edit, upload, or just view. So you can manage that at a pretty high level. And then around external sharing, you can determine that. So a lot of these things, like this specific environment, we have pretty permissive, kind of anyone. But you can actually come in here and change that. And like I said, even with SharePoint, you can leave it pretty permissive at the top level, but then on each site collection, you can manage that a little bit, be a little bit more strict with that. And then event settings for external sharing, basically allow or block sharing with people on specific domains. External users must accept invitations, let external users share items they don't own, so you can kind of manage some of those things. And you can see that that's checked by default, so that's actually something that would be really good to know, that that is something that's on by default. And then syncing, as I mentioned, show the sync button on the OneDrive website allows syncing only on PCs joined to specific domains. So that's where you can kind of limit them from syncing to their personal device. And then block syncing of specific file types. So I actually had a customer that was worried about the amount of time they had a lot of CAD files. And they were worried about the amount of time it would take for all these users to sync all these CAD files. And they didn't really want them syncing them, so that was something that they could come in and block that specific file type from being synced. Just definitely something, if that is something that you're going to do, just really make sure you understand what the ramifications are and communicate that to users so that they understand, and you're not getting a bunch of support tickets about why they can't sync their CAD files or whatever files are placed in there. And then storage, so default storage and days to retain things in the recycle bin. Device access, so you can actually allow access only from specific IP address locations. And there's some mobile application management as well, which I haven't had a chance to dig into. And then you have some things around compliance, notifications, and then the data migration that just links you over and tells you a little bit about migrating content to OneDrive if you're coming from another cloud tool or something like that. All right, let me see if there's any. Can you have a group OneDrive account with a large capacity?
I've seen people ask about that, having a group OneDrive account. If it's a group, it's a SharePoint library. You're not going to want to have a group OneDrive account. That's not a thing.
I mean, some of those settings apply to, and you'll see like it even tells you in those settings that it applies to SharePoint and OneDrive, and that's because SharePoint is really for the more collaborative.
Yeah, the whole point of OneDrive is that is your drive, like each person's individual OneDrive is their personal file storage. And if it's not a OneDrive, then SharePoint libraries are what you use. And technically a OneDrive is a SharePoint library. So, just kind of keep that in mind.
Yeah, and OneDrive, it's in the name. It's for one. Intended for one. Of course, people still share stuff occasionally for people to pick up. But all right, so let's go ahead and move on to the next. And Laura, this is where you might be able to fill in some of the things that I may not know. So basically, Power Apps and Flow, you will notice that clicking on the Admin Center button for Power Apps and Flow, and I'll kind of go back over here and show that. And this is what I was seeing. That it looks like it is, and this is where, Laura, you can tell me if I'm incorrect about this assumption, but it appears, unless it's going to work fine now, it was appearing yesterday that this was being locked down to specific licenses. Like you would need an additional license to access this, but
Oh, yeah.
it might cycle back.
In my, yeah, you have to have, oops, sorry. Let me see if I can pull mine up.
I did notice while you're doing that, so yeah, it was basically just showing me when I clicked on that, it was telling me that I needed an additional license. But I did notice that there is a new, yeah, see, there's where it's saying that. But there is a new admin center coming, which I can access. It is still in preview. It's basically for Power Apps and Flow and the Common Data Service. So it's admin.powerplatform.microsoft.com is how you get to it currently. And it looks like some of the settings out there are still kind of in the works, but it looks like that's where they're going to kind of bring all of those things together. So you'll have things like technical support. It looks like I messed up this slide here, but it's supposed to say analytics. And then on the second row, the manage environments. So that whole idea of having like, test and prod and things like that for your Power Apps. You can actually, manage those all from that. Eventually, you'll be able to manage them all from that admin center, and then things around the Common Data Service.
Okay, I've got the Power Apps thing. I'll just show that in here. So in Power Apps, you have to go to your environment, and then when you go to security here, and you have environment roles, which it gives you 2 roles: admins, that people that can do admin stuff, and then makers are people that can create new Power Apps. And then this is where you have organization user and database owner, or for CDS really. And then under roles, this is where you would see who has that role, admin and maker. So this is where you can define who is allowed to make Power Apps. So none of these say anything about end users, of course, because end users would just, each Power App you're going to share with end users. But this is who admins all the Power Apps, and this is who can create Power Apps. And then you also have under resources, if I click apps here, that's going to show me a list of, if I'm an admin, it's going to show me a list of all the apps in my whole environment, which, yeah, I'm not sure if it's just really slow today or what, but usually you can see all the apps and flows in that whole environment. So you're not going to have multiple environments unless you're at a certain license level, though. So that's another one. Security, resources. Anyway, so yeah, this is a couple of flows that I have in this environment, and I don't think I have any apps in this other environment. So yeah, I guess you don't really have any of that if you're not in that license level.
Yeah, and I did notice that this new Power Platform I was able to get to, I'm not sure if this is going to also get locked down like that. So that'll be interesting to see, because I was able to get to that where I wasn't able to get to the Power Apps one. But here I can see analytics. So I can see analytics for the Common Data Service, Flow, and Power Apps. Get to the environments and manage those. I don't have any. That's why, or any separate from the main one. Data integration, data gateway, data policies, and then the individual admin centers for those things of the Power Platform. So it looks pretty interesting, but it looks like some of that stuff will kind of be merged together, which I think we talked about before, that even if you are using the Power Apps and Flow, that pretty much changes to one affect the other, right, Laura? Like especially around like the environments and things like that. Like if you change that,
yes, they are all pretty
center.
much one and the same. off the top of my head last time I looked.
Yeah. I mean, it could change overnight. But it does seem like they are at least pushing these things into one admin center, so that becomes a little bit clearer. So like I said earlier, I was mentioning how, you'll see shared settings everywhere. But this kind of helps, if they are moving those into one admin center, that will make it a little bit more clear for people to manage. Anything else, Laura, that you think is worth pointing out just from I mean, I know you went through a couple settings in the other one, but just didn't know if there was
No, just remember that power hour that we did on all the reporting, and we talked a lot about that
Yes.
Office 365 level reporting.
Yes.
That they added, that Flow was in there at the time when we did that power hour, all the analytics stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But Power Apps has been added in there now too.
Cool. All right.
And if you have Power BI, then you can look at analytics for each app. But
yeah,
not everybody has that.
that's helpful. All right. So just a little bit about that. Let's move on. Security and compliance. I'm actually going to grab, I know there's a conversation going on over in Teams, so I'll catch up with that in a second. But in the meantime, I'm actually going to grab and put this link into Teams. This is another article I wrote specifically about information governance. And one of the things that I touched on was the security and compliance area. And there's a lot of stuff under security and compliance. There's things like, and I always get this acronym wrong, but it's GDRP, I think. But there's things around that. There's just all kinds of stuff. There's stuff around like external users and like the things you can go and find out if there are external users, what are they sharing, what are they looking at. You can get that kind of information. One thing in particular that I think is important, especially from an information governance perspective, is the retention policies and labels. So these are things that can be created, and basically they can either be automatically applied to a user, so they can automatically be given, or no, sorry, not to a user, to a document, to a file. They can automatically be applied to a file, or you can actually push them and allow users to apply them to a file on their own. So you can choose either of those. And what it does is you can kind of determine, it's similar to the information management policies we had in the past, where you can actually determine, how long the content is retained for. And then what to do with it once it hits that retention date. So you can have it delete it just automatically. You can have it trigger a review, basically, where it would notify a specific person to take a look at it and see if it does need to be like moved somewhere else or deleted or something like that. And then you can do just nothing, leave the content as is and just kind of mark it. And then there's just a couple other things there. You can even use a label to classify content as a record, and a couple other features out there. And then in addition to that, you have the ability to then come in and really take a look at label usage. So you can look at reports that will show you where those labels are being used, what is actually going on out there with them, are things being deleted, and that kind of thing. So that's pretty helpful. So let's take a look at that. So here under classifications, I can go to labels. And there is sensitivity labels. So that's not what I was talking about specifically today, but there are sensitivity labels out there as well, which is really important if you have the need to have like classified content, inside of OneDrive or SharePoint. And then over here we have a retention label. So I can go ahead and create a label. Hopefully it'll be quick enough here. I can create a label here, give it a description for admins and for users, and go next, turn on retention. And that's where I'm going to see some of those settings that we saw on the screenshot. And then I can go ahead and save that. I'm not going to do it right now. So then that would create that label. And then here I have the option to publish the label. which means that I'm going to allow users to assign this to things. So they can actually, label some of their files as they are, cleaning up their OneDrive or their SharePoint libraries. They can label their files, and this thing gets applied. Or I can auto apply a label to specific content. So I have both of those options out there. There's label policies, so I can create policies around those labels, kind of related to the whole auto apply. And then I think it's under data governance, label activity explorer, I believe. Let me see if that's the right one. And then the label activity explorer, I can come pick a label and then just kind of get an idea of what's going on. What's the file name, who applied it, how, is it a new label, an old label, what's the workload? You can kind of get a really good idea of how those things are being used. So all of those things are out there. I can even see additional reports here under retention about that. And then even one thing that's not exactly related to that, but something different. Let me see if I can find it. The audit log. This is another area that's really helpful if I need to get an audit of users' activities. I have a whole bunch of things, a whole bunch of options out here I can come and run and kind of see, what's going on with different activities. People are deleting things or checking in things, checking out things, all of that kind of stuff. So this is really important from a governance perspective. One thing I like to kind of remind people is that in a self-service site creation world, there can be a lot of content that you are not aware of or almost becomes impossible to manage. So that's why it's good to think through some of these retention things early on and apply them and make them kind of a part of your training and a part of, just what users need to do inside the system. Kind of thinking through some of that stuff early on, if possible, may help you in the long run with kind of managing the content, especially because, like I said, it's a self-service site creation world, and there's a lot of things that they're going to create, and there's a lot of things that they're going to put out there that you're not going to be always aware of. All right, and I could go into more detail about information governance, and maybe we will do that in more detail on a session. But just kind of wanted to point out, like I said, some of these important things that are in the admin centers that are good to know. And finally, this was broken earlier. It worked last night. Let's see right now if it will actually open. I'm gonna go over on my other screen here and see if I can actually get it to open, and then we can go through. Let's see. Yep, I'm getting this. So when I try to click on the Microsoft Search Admin Center, this is what I'm seeing. So I think it might be currently down, but let's talk a little bit about it anyway. So this is a really cool admin center. So I'm kind of sad that it's down, because hopefully we'll definitely have to do another session and kind of chat about this soon. So basically, this is the newest. The idea behind Microsoft Search is that it will be one search experience for all of Office 365 and Office. What that means is whether you're in SharePoint, whether you're using Bing, whether you're on your Windows machine that's connected to the domain, no matter what, it'll be this kind of one search experience that you'll be getting. And this is just really rolled out to a few places right now, so you'll see it in Bing. And you have a couple of things you can do. You can actually, as an admin, you can manage bookmarks. So you can actually set specific bookmarks that are things that users are always searching for. They're always looking for the link to payroll. They're always looking for...
What's the equivalent to bookmarks, Joelle, of the old stuff?
Probably would just be I would say the equivalent to bookmarks would be kind of like best bets a little bit. It could even just be a lot for people that didn't use those. It could even just be like a list of corporate links on the homepage of their intranet. Like the things that they're always looking for. It could be the equivalent of some of those type of things. So like I said, things like, our payroll system, our, anything that's like a link or something like that they need to get to. And then there's also Q&A, which is really cool. You can actually build out questions and answers and set terms around those. So if people are searching for a specific term, then they see this Q&A response. So if they do search, and I can actually, let me test this out over here and just make sure it's working today. Let me see. Hold on, and then I'll show you guys what I'm doing. Yeah, there, that works. Okay. I couldn't remember if I set this up correctly, but let me see. So here, if I'm searching pay stub, I'll see show results from SV MacGyver. That's just the name of my tenant. And then here is a Q&A. So it's saying, where do we go to get our pay stubs? It has a link, and then it has some information down here. So this is an example of the way a Q&A would look. So they would be able to look for a specific term. And in the actual admin center, which I can't get to right now, that's where I set that up. I set what's the question, I set a link, I set a description, and then I can even set like the key terms, if you will, things that they might be searching for that would bring back this result. And then here I can see all results. I can see files, sites, conversations. All of this stuff is coming from my SV MacGyver, my tenant. So all these things are coming from Office 365, basically. So I'm able to see this in addition to just my regular web search. That's kind of what's out there right now, but as you'll see over the next year, you'll see that these things are also going to get pushed into our other applications as well. You also have locations, which I didn't mention, so you can specify, like, let's say if you are a company with hundreds of locations, and your users are often searching to find out, like, what's the phone number for this location, or what's the mailing address for this location, you can load all of that information in, and then it becomes a part of that same search experience. So if they're looking for, like, you know, the Asheville, North Carolina, you know, it would pull that up and give them that information. So there's definitely some good things that an admin can do out there. Some other tools. There is a browser extension for admins. Let me see if it will actually function since the other part's down. Yeah, it won't function, but you can see here I have it. And what this normally looks like is it would give me an ability to create bookmarks and create Q&A kind of on the fly. So I don't have to go into the admin center. I can actually just do it directly from the browser. So that just makes it very helpful from the admin's perspective. And then another thing is you actually have some really good imports for search. So if you have best bets from classic SharePoint and you want to push those into bookmarks, there is an ability to do that from the admin center. There is a setting for that. And I think that's pretty new. I just noticed it yesterday. But that's kind of a really neat feature that may save you some time as a search admin. And there's a couple other things out there as well. Sadly, like I said, I can't show them right now. So we'll definitely, when that's up, we probably will need to do a little bit more of a detailed look at that. And I believe that covers it right on 2 minutes before.
Franklin said, any governance or advice on managing gateways for flows or Power BI?
From me, no. I don't really know. I unfortunately don't really know much about that. I'm not sure if you do, Laura.
Look, I'm throwing my settings back together in XSplit as we speak. Let's see. That's so funny. Maybe we'll get the dogs walking by. Yeah, thanks. I've never done gateways, so I don't know the answer to that. I did want to update you all on so let us know if any other questions, let's see, about any of this governance. And then in the meantime, while Joelle answers questions in there, I'll tell you all about the exam I took. Remember I mentioned last week I was going to take an exam. So I took exam MS300, deploying Microsoft 365 teamwork. And what that was it's really Office 365 admin. It did have a little bit of PowerShell. I would say, let's see, maybe 6 or 7 questions having to do with PowerShell. And then it had things to do with like site collection administration in SharePoint and the team, like all that new Teams and Skype for Business admin stuff that we talked about. Oh, that's weird. There we go. Inception going on there, Joelle. I can't close Skype for Business. It's so weird. Anyway, So it had stuff about that Teams admin, and it had like settings about having like some of those meeting policies stuff, and upgrading people from Skype for Business to Teams, and it had some hub site stuff, global navigation and hub sites, but most of the PowerShell stuff had to do with like set SPO tenant stuff, and I don't know. I have no idea how I did on this test. You don't find out when it's a beta exam. You don't find out for a few weeks. So I have no idea how I did, but definitely brush up on some PowerShell. I think it was mostly like tenant, SPO tenant level stuff that it asked. And it had little scenarios where you had to say, if you're going to do this, then what order would you do the steps in? You know, you'd go to the site settings and then go here and then click this. And had to know which admin center to go in to do XYZ. So, HL Jones has a question. Changes to site permissions. Oh, yeah. Can no longer link from Hero or Quick Link directly to a library. Ooh. Did they change that, Joelle? Do you know?
You might just have to put like the actual URL in directly. I mean, I think there was at one point you were able to link to like click the library in the the site thing, like you would click to add a link, and then it would have like, but now it just lets you do files, I think, or items. It doesn't actually let you add the library, so you just have to grab a link to the library and put that in manually.
Wow. So I'm starting to get my settings fixed for my my XSplit. It's all jacked up now. Anyway, thanks everybody for coming. Yeah, we'll wrap it up. Next week I'm teaching my 4-day Power Apps training class, and so we will not be having Power Hour. And don't forget to sign up to go to the SharePoint conference in May in Las Vegas. Use my code Rogers to get a discount, and hopefully you all will come and sign up for my all-day workshop. That's a post-conference workshop. It's going to be Power Apps and Flow. It's going to be awesome. I can't wait. And thanks everybody for coming to Power Hour. Sorry about all the technical difficulties. Thanks, Joelle, for your presentation. It's good stuff and constantly changing. That's really, really fun. And and we added closed captioning to all of our training on iwmentor.com. So that's one of those things. I was about to send an email out to the students, but I wanted to let you all know we're pretty excited about that. Thanks everybody for coming. Thanks everybody for coming to chat with us. Over and out.
Bye.